And I literally just started weeping, just crying of like, I feel so much pressure. Like hardly anybody understands how close we are to the precipice. Everybody thinks we're doing well. And in many ways we are doing well. If this call doesn't go well, I genuinely think it might be over. We signed a term sheet to sell iVerify on February 13th. December 9th, I'm not sure if I have a company. December 13th, I have a term sheet to sell the company for over $100 million. So it's just crazy. I mean, that's the roller coaster. So when people look at the headlines of what happened, they're like, oh, look at that. He pulled technology out of a university, raised $10 million, and 4 years later sold it for 100. Wow, that seemed like a really easy ride. No idea.
Hello again and welcome. I'm Eric Jorgensen and I don't know much, but I have some very smart friends. And today I want to introduce you to a friend and serial entrepreneur, Toby Rush. He has founded and sold companies across a variety of industries, supply chain, logistics, biometrics, and RFIDs. He's probably best known, especially around here in Kansas City, as the founder of iVerify, which is a huge, groundbreaking biometric authentication company, which got acquired by Ant Financial, which is the VC arm of Alibaba. They were very early to use front-facing cameras to scan the blood vessel patterns in your retinas. Is crazy. And he's now the CEO of Ideem. They are working to eliminate two-factor authentication. You know, those annoying texts you get to log into things. They're working on, and have already built really, technology to remove that, but maintain all the necessary security. So we talk about Ideem, we talk about his whole career as a serial founder. We talk about how to spot emerging technologies and correctly time the go-to-market around new tech, how biometrics have evolved and the different sort of trade-offs around security. And Toby being a multi-exit founder, we also talk about how to decide to get back in the trenches after a huge life-changing acquisition. It's a really interesting kind of wide-ranging conversation, and I'm really excited to kind of introduce you to Toby and everything that he's been working on. As a caveat, and just to be completely transparent, we invested in Ideem through Rolling Fund. If you like Ideem, if you want to invest in similar startups like this one that apply breakthrough technologies in huge markets, please open your browser right now and type in rolling.fund. Over the past few years, we've invested in approaching 40 companies now, including Allo Atomics, who builds nuclear fission microreactors, Longshot, which builds gigantic air cannons for launching cargo into space, asteroid mining companies, next generation battery companies, all kinds of fascinating things that are making the world a better place over the next couple decades. I'm honored that many, many listeners like you have now invested alongside us in these early stage startups. Accredited investors can join through AngelList today. And with a rolling fund, the sooner you invest, the more companies you get to participate in. So if you want to put your money to work alongside ours, go to rolling.fund or click on the link in the show notes below. I'm happy to chat through Twitter or email if you're interested. Now, I invite you to take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy Smart Friends arriving at your ears in 3, 2, 1. I like to start. This is my favorite question for getting to know people. Who are your heroes?
Oh, wow. Who are my heroes? Strong faith background. So Jesus, I'd have to say, is one of just the leadership and the impact that he has had on the world as continues to reverberate kind of throughout the ages. I sometimes I cringe things like Elon Musk isn't a hero. I have a ton of respect for a lot of the stuff that Elon does. Can't stand some of the stuff that Elon does, but as an entrepreneur, the stuff that he has done just blows my mind. I just can't help but admire a lot of that. I've got, friends that serve in politics in DC, and I have the utmost respect for them and doing it for the right reasons. And it's super hard, but they're in it for the right reasons in the game, and they take a lot of abuse from a lot of sides. So there's a few folks that have, public service is always, near and dear. Those folks that are willing to dive in and serve, not for their own benefit, but for the broader good, has always had a place in my heart.
I think it's very good to be able to take lessons and admire people, even if you don't admire the whole package. Like, we all have things to be admired for. We all have things that we're perhaps less excited about ourselves. But if there's not a long list of people that you're excited to trade lives with, I think it's generally a good sign that you've made a bunch of the right decisions for you personally.
No, it is. Like I love my life. I got an amazing
Yeah.
wife and I'm making 4 kids, and I've made tons of mistakes and they've all made me who I am today. And I genuinely like who I am and proud of what I've accomplished.
That's another one of my favorite questions actually that you just reminded me of with that is what is something that you have had to teach yourself very deliberately that is like a core part of sort of what makes you who you are?
Oh man, so early childhood, I had a really rough early childhood and, the just very unstable, right? Parents in and out, adopted, am I wanted? Am I loved? Am I good enough? And so there's a tendency for that to lead to people pleasing and always being overly concerned about, are people going to like me? And am I successful? And do I have what it takes? And so really, and it's easy then as an entrepreneur to put the business in place of that, right? So if the business is successful, I'm successful. If the business is doing well, if people like the things that we're producing, then people like me. And you start to intertwine your identity with that of the company. And I have multiple times have had to untangle those. I was like, no, like when the company's about to fail, that doesn't mean I am a failure. If the company is dying, that doesn't mean I am dying. And conversely, if it's going really well, that doesn't mean I'm a good person. Right. And so untangling that, very, for me, very early childhood, hardwired, am I good enough? And, do people like me? And putting my business in place of that as a proxy.
Yeah. I imagine there's an advantage and a disadvantage to that, right? Like when your identity is so closely intertwined with the company, you can bring a level of like care and intensity and effort that is like probably really hard for people who have a like, oh, this is just a job for me.
No, it is true. I mean, you've got that is an interesting balance, right? Because I think I do care deeply about things that I put my team in. There's definitely reputation to it, right? And you want to care. Hopefully, you're working on something you actually care about. So both the work product that you're doing. This is my fourth. I'm on my fourth startup from scratch, and a question I actually got from a lot of folks is like, why are you still doing this? Like, this is
Yeah.
your fourth one. And, some of my previous have been really successful. Like, I don't need to keep doing this, but I love it. And I think when I really took a step back and asked myself, like, I'm just a builder at heart, right? I love building product. I love building teams. I love building companies. And my wife laughs. Like, my happy place at home is in my wood shop where I'm building tables and products. And like this, that's just fun to me. Like, I think if I were not doing anything, I would find something to go build.
Yeah, well, you took a sort of a I don't know what you would call it, sabbatical, a break. You had a really big exit, and then you kind of it sounds like you were in the wood shop for a couple months, couple of years.
Yeah. I think on my LinkedIn is funny. I got more comments on it. I think taxi driver, family planner, or Uber driver, family planner, and tinkerer, I think is what I
Yeah,
put for a
yeah.
while. And I get a lot of fun comments on that one. But it was good to unplug for a little bit and take some time. And doing the startup life is not for the faint of heart, or it's very taxing on the time, right? So when you do get the opportunity to take a window to just have some fun and step back a little bit and enjoy some of the things that is a little bit harder to enjoy while you're in the midst of the building. So yeah, I was able to take
Especially
a
while you
nice
have
time.
a young family, like that's
Oof.
being able to take some time and be like fully present. That's a
Mhm.
huge benefit. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people should
no.
take like a work harder to take a mini retirement when their kids are like I don't know what the perfect sweet spot age for that is. You probably have a stronger opinion on it, but
Yeah, I don't have an opinion other than you take it when they come, right? Don't think, oh, I'll just do a little bit more. I'll just jump straight back in. I mean, I always encourage people if they're leaving one job or going to the next or finishing one startup, or the success or failure, if they have the opportunity to take a window of time, absolutely take it. We get too consumed with what's next and how do I continue to show progress, right? Or continue to justify my time, and just having time to yourself is all the justification you need.
yeah, especially if you have that drive to like, continue to prove yourself by creating and continuing to do that. Oh, it's also addicting. It's fun. It's like exciting. It's when you have that pace of like the pace and the stakes and the level of investment of, just feeling pulled into the present because you're really in the trenches and like the sense of overcoming some of those challenges is like hard to set that aside.
No, absolutely.
Your whole background is like very interesting, but before we like flash back, I think given where we are, what's the thing that pulled you sort of back into the trenches from your life of leisure?
My life of leisure. Well, actually, I've done a number of things. I actually tried a blockchain company 2 or 3 years ago that did not go well. Right. I built a really beautiful product that absolutely nobody used. It was painful. Definitely one of those identity checks of like, am I still doing this because I don't want to have a failure? Or do I really believe this thing has something to go? And I came back and I'm like, we're 3 years out. We're 4 years out. Right. And more of my time and my investors' money isn't going to make a difference. So we actually sent money back to the investors. We're like, hey guys, this is so far out. We should just call it now. And a lot of my investors are like, but why? I was like, I walk through all my logic and what we've done and what we're thinking about. And they're like, okay, we get it. And we trust you. What are you doing next? I'm like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know. I don't have a plan yet. But
Uber
this one
driver, family planner.
this one actually kind of was a bit of a surprise. A friend of mine was working on another company actually here in town, a startup, and said, hey, Toby, I'm really struggling. I've got, we're not making traction, just a lot of challenges. Can you help me give me a second set of eyes? And when I jumped in, I'm like, dude, you have two products. They were initially based on the same core technology, but as they developed, they really two separate teams. These are two separate companies, right? And as you're looking at raising money, VCs might like one, they might like the other, but almost no one's going to like both together. And so it was like, hey, let's spin this one out. And one of them I actually knew really well was in authentication and identity. So I understand identity and authentication really well. And it really was exactly what that was. So using really advanced cryptography, crazy cool stuff that cryptographically binds to your device and serves as a two-factor authentication, right? So there's really annoying 6-digit codes you get texted, the authenticator apps, the push notifications. We get rid of all those. They're really simple drop-in SDK that really payments is where we're focused. It kind of makes payment authentication easy and invisible, right? And so you can more easily accept payments with less fraud, no friction. That's a big winner, especially in emerging markets. Like the US is so isolated and insulated when we think about payments. All we have are credit cards, right? We live like, I don't know what the percentage is. Got to be high 90% are done on credit or debit cards. And we have an issue. We just call up Visa and say, hey, fix this. And they do, right? Most of the world lives on instant payment, whether that's account to account or to a wallet. And so instant payments are instant fraud, right? And so they do tons of authentication on the front side to make sure that you are really you before allowing an authentication to go forward. So we're able to kind of cryptographically bind to the device. We also leverage kind of the local and the Face ID or Touch ID, the local biometrics, combine those two and provide what's called a payment passkey or payment authentication to cards, to wallets, to pay by bank. And so working at that location where a customer of the merchant as they're going through that checkout flow, but as soon as they hit pay, you're also the customer of that payment method. So how do you authenticate a user who's the customer of two different entities, but keep that flow really seamless? And that's kind of the specialty that we're focused on.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want, I'd imagine, is like additional friction at the moment of transaction.
That's the
Like,
magic moment. That's what
yeah,
everybody's going for. Like
yeah,
they're getting ready
everybody
to
spent
buy.
so much time and effort removing milliseconds from that, and then all of a sudden you've got, a two-factor auth and a text and a dead zone and all of that stuff slowing you down. So this actually, like, is it fair to say that like two-factor auth is dead and it's just like a matter of time?
It's funny. Two-factor authentication is alive and well. It's just invisible, right? So you still want 2FA. You still want to say, is the person present? Is their device present? We just happen to do that in a way that's seamless and invisible to the user. So we keep strong security. We just reduce the friction, fraud, and cost of things that we talk a lot about. How do you reduce the friction for the user, fraud for the merchant, and cost for the merchant?
Two-factor auth is dead. Long live two-factor auth.
Yeah.
The
Well,
text
long
message.
of the invisible two-factor auth.
Yes, the text messages are dead. The two-factor auth lives on. That is very cool and an exciting like piece. So were you involved in the decision to break up that initial company?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm like, hey, just doing basically you either have to shut one of them down or you've got to split them and let them both live. And then they came to me and said, hey, would you want to run this piece? And initially when I looked at it, it didn't have like the vision I just articulated was not nearly as clear kind of back then. Like it was two-factor authentication, but it was standard login. It was a huge, massive global bank was kind of the design partner. They were a customer. They're rolling forward, just great. I'm like, you just can't sell to big, massive banks. That's super hard. And the more I looked at it and thought about it and dug into it and did a bunch of just reached to go back to my own network and said, hey, how would this matter? How would this matter? And it just became very clear that friction at time of checkout was a massive, literally a global pain point. And so, yeah, so I was like, yeah, that actually sounds fascinating. I know the space. You basically get a product that's already built with a murky global banking customer, and we kind of get off to the races.
That's awesome. So do you think that's a general heuristic of like, if you see a technology that serves two use cases, like you should basically always split that up and have a company organized around one use case?
Yeah, I think it'd be really around who are your customers, what's your go-to-market, and what does the long-term product roadmap look like? So if those really start to diverge, you got to split them, right? So actually, we're talking to a really good VC friend of mine. And they're like, hey, we've got this thing. And he's like, guys, here's the challenge. And he articulated it really well. He's like, if you have two product A and product B, if product A is really successful, product B is not going to get attention. If product B is really successful, product A is not going to get attention. If they're both really successful, you don't have enough money or time. Right. And so you're far better off of just like splitting them, let them survive on their own. If they're great ideas, they'll continue. It's really hard to do, especially in a startup, to do multiple things. It's a different go to market, a different product there's not a lot of cross sale, upsell. Better to spit them out.
Mm. And the team just gets to kind of like pick a lane and
Well, again, this one, the teams are almost already separate. So the core software team was already kind of working on one product or the other. So it actually wasn't a lot. I mean, there's a handful of folks. I think everybody was pretty excited just because they felt the stress as well, right? They're like, hey, what are we doing? And we're distracted. And am I doing this? Am I doing that? And, it's amazing how, doing startups is stressful enough. Adding that kind of ambiguity, it's bad for everybody.
yeah, I think Naval had a good articulation of like stress as like steel, a material is under stress when it is pushed in two different directions at the same time. Like people is the same definition of stress. So if you're trying to focus all your energy on two very different things, like of course you're going to feel stress. So it's an interesting thing to go through. I feel like a lot of people don't have the maybe courage or confidence to like make a call like that because it feels so final to like separate these two things and let them each live or die on their own.
Well, I love a lot of the behavioral economics, like the Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the things that really struck me a long time ago when I was reading those of people love optionality and they fear the lack of optionality, right? It's like you give someone, like there's this test they did, is like there's 3 doors, right? And so you could spend money to keep a door open because you didn't know what prize was going to be behind each door. And even when mathematically you told the person you will lose more money by keeping all 3 doors open, people just wanted to keep all 3 doors open because there's this weird human psyche about lack of optionality is bad. And so when you think about, I'm going to split two companies, you lose an optionality, right? Okay, this team's going to bet on this horse and this team's going to bet on this horse and we'll wish the other team well, but you lose optionality. And sometimes that is a hard decision to make as a human.
Yeah. Were those tough conversations like among the team or the investors as you were sort of separating those entities?
No, again, we try to. It's only I've learned over 20 plus years of being an entrepreneur of articulate well, be really authentic, know your stuff, and come open handed. Is like, hey, here's what we're thinking. This is why we think it. Give us some feedback. This is what we think the right path forward is. And that not always, but vast majority of time, people come to the same conclusion, or they're like, hey, I get it. I don't have a strong opinion. I trust you. But nobody was like, that's a terrible idea. And so it was good discussions, but not negative in any way.
Yeah, that's great. So I think you sort of hinted at this, but I think it's always a question worth sort of drilling down on who is the customer of Ideem? Who's the person who's like making the decision to purchase this product from you and downstream, I imagine getting pushed out to users like,
No, this is actually a fun one. So I'll tell you what our customers are today, and we're finding there's a new set of customers we hadn't thought about. So our customers today are, I think it's payment wallets and banks that are doing payments, right? So you might be pay by bank or the credit card, right? So if you're kind of doing those, now we're selling directly to the bank because they have to authenticate the user as they're checking out, right? And so the flow looks like I hit pay, a little web modal pops up. And then if it's pay by wallet, pay by bank, buy now, pay later, that's our customer. That little view pops up. We've cryptographically bound to that browser. We say, yep, it's the same device. You don't need to send an OTP. You don't have to ask for authenticator. You don't have to do a push notification. It automatically does all those and it goes away, like less than 1 second, up and down. And that has been. What we're finding is that in the world of credit cards, holy smokes, Visa and MasterCard makes this a complicated space. They do some amazing things and the amount of acceptance, and it's hard. So I don't mean to degrade them, but man, they make it complicated as well. But there's a new capability. It's actually starting in Europe, of all places, called 3D Secure. And they're allowing the merchant to do what's called a strong customer authentication. So think about doing a Face ID. We do the device binding. You can pass that through with the payment flow to the issuing bank. That's the bank who actually is giving you the credit card. And they'll take that like, oh, the merchant has already done authentication, called a delegated authentication. And I can accept that as a payment authentication. And I don't need to do anything more. And so in that case, we're actually selling to the merchant. So they want higher acceptance rate. Acceptance means the card process goes through. It doesn't get rejected. Again, in the US, this is not a big issue in the US. Internationally, they could have 3 to 7% failure rates on on
Whoa.
card transactions, right? And you imagine the US, we're like, I hardly ever get the transaction
Yeah.
declined. Gets declined all the time. Well, again, if you can pass in strong
Because of
authentication,
suspected fraud? That's
yeah, a lot of
like,
fraud, really strong fraud rules. Like if you're in, I'll tell you how crazy some of the world is. People find this fascinating. If you're in Malaysia or Singapore, you make any online purchase, it sends a push notification to your phone. And you have to go you have to open that banking app and hit OK. But even if you're on the same device, like you hit pay, you have to wait for the push notification. Okay, go to your banking app, hit OK, and then jump back to whatever the merchant's app is. Right? If you're in Nigeria, every single online transaction gets an OTP and one-time passcode. You get a text message with a 6-digit code. Right? If you're in India, every single online transaction gets a text message with a one-time passcode. Right? In the US, we don't have any of that. And so that kind of friction and that kind of cost leads to lots of failure. Right? Just, the OTP doesn't arrive, the person drops out. And so as we really dive into the world of credit cards and debit cards, we realize there's this whole other kind of the merchant customer base. So it's still around payment authentication, right? But our technology can be used at the merchant to pass in with the flow. And then there's one other interesting use case. It's called verified credentials, right? So also in Europe, where if you are an employee, your employer can give you a digital credential that kind of is in a wallet. If you've graduated from university, if you've gotten certain kind of certifications as a technician, as a welder, as a plumber, an electrician, you get issued these verified credentials. And then if you need physical access to a location, digital access on your phone to something, these verified credentials can say, hey, they can continue. So the user journey is kind of the same. I'm a customer of some website or even say it's a business I want to do some business with. They want to verify, hey, are you really an employee of one of my partners? Right? Well, you don't want them to jump out of that app and go do something else. So just like a payment flow, we can authenticate a user on behalf of two separate people at one time. So this whole verified credentials world is fun and fascinating. As an entrepreneur, that's the stuff that's fun to me. Of like, hey, we got this core product. Hey, it works great for wallets. It works great for pay by bank. We can solve cards. Like there's a lot of credit card usage in the world. And there's a whole new use case that is years. I mean, it'll be new for a while, but the use cases are fascinating around verified credentials,
the verified credentials are for that getting access to physical space?
physical and digital, both. Yeah. So if you show up to a lot of there's 7 or 8 states now that let you do a mobile driver's license that's purely digital. Right. So imagine in your phone, but if you're going into a bar and they want to know if you're 21, why are you giving them your entire driver's license? Like they're simply asking, are you 21? So you could query this digital verified credential and it simply says yes or no. So it's basically much better privacy preserving. And it answers the question that they're really asking. You don't have to pull out this piece of paper and have someone take a look at it. And that's a really simple example of your a digital mobile driver's license as a verified credential.
That's an interesting one, and I like that because I feel like the prevalence of cameras, like, if you would have told us 20 years ago, especially our parents 20 years ago, like, there'll be cameras in front of your face every second of every day, and everyone in the world will have one, and you will never know if they're recording or not. That would seem like an absolute, like, dystopian nightmare. And especially, like, they're just getting smaller and they're just getting more common. So if there's a bouncer at a bar who's got those like Ray-Ban, you know, cameras on, and he's taking a picture of every girl's driver's license that goes by with their address on it for a night, like that's a bad outcome. And having like just confirming, yes, I'm 21, let me in digitally. That seems like one of those things that is like so obvious, like the future should have something like that, but we just haven't had the cryptography necessary to like
Yeah,
do
cryptography and
that before.
digital infrastructure. And so, I mean, that's a simple one. What if you're doing a delivery? Say you're actually delivering something or actually picking something up. How do I know you're the guy who's supposed to be here? Like, do you work for that company? Like, again, think of the gig economy, right? So how do you secure that? But again, you don't expect, again, even assume this is at a business, right? You've got an Uber-like service going to a business to pick something up and transport it somewhere. How do I know you're the right guy? You're not just doing my stuff. Verified credentials is a perfect use case. So I'm on a website and I'm able to, even this one, I can get a discount because I'm a business partner. Like, do you actually work for that company? Did you actually graduate from that university? Did you actually have this, VOTEC, certification that you can actually go do these things? It's really a fascinating world when you think about digital credentialing and
Yeah.
verifying credentials.
That's super cool. Yeah, I mean, there's probably 20 different people that have shown up at my house wearing an Amazon vest in their own car in the last month. I'm like, I have no idea. Like,
Right. You hope they're the right guy. And yeah, so
yeah, blue vests are pretty easy to come by. I don't know if that should be our
I'm sure.
identity verification system.
I have a pretty good bet that you could buy an Amazon uniform on Amazon.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's they should just go arrest everybody who's doing that. If you bought an Amazon, like that's a sting operation.
It's probably so. I'm sure they have
Uh,
some undercovers there.
it sounds like it could be the merchant or it could be the bank who is the like accountable party in the event of fraud, and they are the people. I mean, the merchant it sounds more motivated to remove the friction from the transaction, right? Like they want that 3 to 7% boost to their business by reducing the friction around the transaction. But everybody should be. I mean, they want more money to move. They want a better user experience.
The
Uh,
bank makes money when the card settles. Right, that's how they
okay,
make money,
okay.
right? And so, yeah, so they're very motivated. Everybody's motivated in the right direction. The only guy who's not motivated are the fraud guys, and we don't really care about the fraud guys.
No, I would like there to be global alignment. I'm a single voter issue on whoever capital punishment for whoever's perpetrating all of these frauds and text messages.
Oof, oh my gosh. You getting all the highway ones? Like the number of you have Kansas toll road, you need to go pay. I'm like, oh my gosh, my kids have gotten them, my mom has gotten them, everyone's gotten them.
I mean yeah, Netflix, Coinbase spoofing
Oh,
the
Coinbase. Holy smokes. Yes.
spoofing the business, spoofing the actual like phone number of my bank and calling. Like I've seen there's some very sophisticated frauds out there, and I don't know what Interpol's doing, but they got we need to staff up Interpol and take out some fraudsters. This is not good.
my it is funny when my kids, they're smart enough now, if they see something fishy, they send it to me. And so now rather than just answering spam or not, it's like, okay, look at the sender. See that +61? That is not the United States. You probably shouldn't trust international codes sending you random text messages about bills that you owe.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a low level. It's an easy spot. But yeah, you can't start them too soon on these phishing scams. Just like,
They're
the
good. I mean, some of them are crazy good.
yeah, and they're going to get better too. I saw somebody posting about a study that this university did about like manipulating users on Reddit, and they were feeding this bot the whole history of the account's messages in order to identify things about them and then use that as inputs to make a more persuasive message. And so, the natural extension of that is like the more artifacts there are of you online that people can put together, the more, the easier you are to maybe spoof or convince. Like you're just increasing surface area.
Well,
Maybe we should
and
end the
we're,
podcast right now.
yeah, really. What do we do? We're still talking, right? Talking about lots of personal things. I mean, we have all sorts of stories. One of the both crazy, amazing opportunities and challenges is this whole kind of agent world, right? So AI agent, they can go do these things for you. Well, when an agent acts on your behalf online, how does it authenticate? Can it pay? Can it approve? Like, so how do you authenticate and authorize an agent to act on your behalf? And again, it's a whole nother realm of fraud and abuse and hacks and different ways bad guys are trying to get in. Yeah. So it is not going away anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why it's good to keep the good guys ahead, and you don't hear a lot of new technologies that make fraud less likely and user experience better,
Yeah,
right?
it is. One of the funny things, I actually laughed at this particular at Ideem and kind of the technology in that in the authentication world, there's something that you know, something you are, and something you have. Those are your only three factors you can choose from. Something you know is your password or PIN. Something you are is your biometric. Something you have is it could be a token, could be your laptop, could be your phone. And everybody wants to focus on something that you are, the biometric. That's where I verify, right? So I come from that world, know it very, very well. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of companies trying to solve that particular problem. Like, I have no desire to jump into that, overcrowded space. Then I looked and I'm like, this is a really interesting possession factor solution. And possession factor is always kind of the redheaded stepchild of the authentication world. Like, nobody wants to focus on it. It's not very sexy. It's kind of boring in a lot of ways.
What does that mean, possession factor?
So something you possess, right? So of the three factors, something you know, password, something you are is your biometric, and then something you possess, you own, or you hold is a possession, called a possession factor. So focusing on the least interesting of the factors, but yet actually one of the most stable because you can do it completely invisible for a user. right? So I can, confirm your phone without you having to even acknowledge or do anything. And so it's always on, it's always there. And so you get really strong security with no friction. And then when you need to, you can, let's do what's called a step up. So you can step up the authentication into a face or fingerprint.
So that's a good segue into your kind of history with verification and authenticity. So take me back to tell me the iVerify story. Where were you when that started?
I'll go one step through. So my very first company, we used cameras on forklifts, so computer vision, and we automated data collection in warehouses, right? So
And
think about putting a
when was this? Circa.
'03 to '09, right? So my very first company I started, dude, I was 27 years old. It was a long time ago. I started in 2003, and we were basically working in warehousing using data capture technology, both RFID and computer vision. I was really captured by computer vision and what we could do with it. And when you're in a warehouse, one of the things that we realized is like forklift drivers are really good at dynamic and unconstrained environments. Like, they want to drive like bats out of hell. They can drive so fast anywhere, but they hate barcode scanning. The stuff they always messed up of like, hey, dude, when you pick a pallet up, always scan the barcode. I don't know how you messed that up, but they would invariably mess up what I picked up or where I put it down. Like you scanned something wrong. You simply didn't scan it when you put it down. And so they're like, if we could automate the scanning on the pickup and the put down, drivers could just drive. Like they could literally, so we joked that we turned forklift drivers into race car drivers. All they had to do was drive. We took care of all of the scanning. So we had a camera on the front of the truck. And so it's always looking, right? And so, hey, I see a pallet. I see a label, auto scan the barcode. So I know what pallet I have. And then we put 2D barcodes in the ceiling, right? And so it's like you own indoor GPS system and you always had an unobstructed view above the forklift, right? And so basically you ended up with a really clean system that automated the stuff that forklift drivers hated and wasn't good at and let them just drive. So that was we sold that to a private equity. That had a really fun day to roll up with them. So I had a great experience with the private equity. They're like, hey, we like the management team. We want to buy a couple of other companies in this space. So we did that. I sold kind of my company to them. And then kind of with their money, I bought 2 more companies. It's a great experience really early on. So I was with them for 2 or 3 years after the acquisition. But then a friend here in Kansas City said, hey, there's this professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City over at UMKC, and they're doing some really cool things with computer vision. I know you're really into that. You should go take a look at it. I'm like, sure. So went over and was just fascinated by Dr. Reza Derekshani is the guy's name. And he was a bit of a mad scientist who like really creative, really personable as far as, professors go. He was wicked smart, very creative, and again, very, very personable, easy to talk to. And so as he was talking about what he was doing, he's like, hey, I'm using computer vision, just regular cameras, but I can look at the blood vessels and the whites of your eyes and determine a biometric, just like a fingerprint. But we eventually called it the iPrint. This was so university. They called it, I can't remember, conjunctival vasculature of the sclera. Like literally, it was like, it was like some crazy name. I'm like, okay, that never works. Like, it's like the fingerprint. Why don't you just call it the iPrint? And so we called it the iPrint. And he had some really cool technology. Usually, a lot of the eye-based technologies take special hardware, special lighting, special cameras, which made it impractical to scale, right? So you're never going to put that on a smartphone, right? And so in fact, I went to the university and they're like, yeah, we got this great technology. We think it's airports, immigration, and military. I'm like, okay, those are really hard to do startups in. Like, okay, but tell me more. I try to understand it. And I'm like, yeah, there's no chance you're going to do a startup in those spaces. But these smartphones had just come out with something they're calling the selfie camera. Could we use the selfie camera to be able to capture the image and do the same thing? And people are like, why would anyone do that? Like because passwords are terrible. Like if I can just look at my phone and that logged me into my phone, that logged me into my application, like that would be a great user experience. And no one likes passwords. And I got a lot of pushback. Like initially, both from investors and the university, are like, if that's such a good idea, Apple and Google would already be doing biometrics on the device. I'm like, I don't know. This feels like a good idea. Let's give it a try. Let's see what we can do. And so we launched iVerify in Q1 of 2012, and we got lucky. Had a great, phenomenal kind of technology engineering team. So we built that little SDK. We were trying to sell it to Wells Fargo at the time. I remember this actually very clearly. And Wells Fargo was like, wow, this is really cool. This is really interesting. And Apple came out with Touch ID, right? The fingerprint. And I'm like, oh crap, did I choose the wrong modality? Like, so eyes a modality, fingerprints a modality. I'm like, did I just screw up? And I called one of my board members and I'm like, did I just like completely screw the company because Apple just chose Touch ID and we're using the eye? Is everybody going to think you have to use Touch? And it's like, absolutely not. Like they've just consumerized biometrics. That's exactly what you are. There's always going to be multiple options. And so it's funny, the value of having kind of experience and wisdom kind of along the way. And so right place, right time. So we started in Q1 of 2012. Touch ID came out in Q3 of 13. So 18 months later. And then a year after that, Apple Pay. And so then everybody was like, payments, payments on your phone. That's what biometrics is going to be used for. And so we had Wells Fargo, we had Citi, we had 60 banks in the US kind of using our little kind of SDK. We were working with a bunch of folks over in Korea, Japan, China, and started calling it Alipay, which is kind of at the time was the world's largest payment wallet. And I said, wow, this is fascinating. They offered to lead our Series B. Right during that conversation, we had another strategic approaches and say, hey, we have 90% of the Android fingerprint market. We would like to be able to sell fingers and eyes to the Android world. Would that make sense? I'm like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so I basically got those two into bidding war and we were able to exit. But, even that story, the story I've told a couple of times, I'll feel more, I guess we're far enough away. I feel more comfortable telling it. So in December 9th of 2015, I am almost out of money. Right. In October of that year, my tier one VC out of Silicon Valley had committed to lead our Series B and then completely backed out on us, left us crazy high and dry, huge sucker punch. Fortunately, my investor stepped up. They gave us an inside round, kind of gave us a little more funding, but even that was coming to an end. I was going to be up at the end of December. Alipay stepped in. They were doing a bunch of testing. They like, wow, this is fascinating. They really, really liked it. And their corporate venture capital investment team said, hey, if our product team agrees to move forward, we want to lead your Series B with a $20 million investment. Like, that's amazing. Like the largest customer that I could think of in the world, literally, they're my largest customer, wants to invest, which kind of gives me the inside track and gives me credibility with everybody else. And so December 9th, we're having basically our final meeting with the product team. They've done a bunch of testing and they're basically going to come back and tell us their results. If those results are good and they decide to move forward, then I can get a little bit more money in to let me give enough runway to finish the round or to get the Series B done. Right. And so December 9th, I can make December 15th payroll. I cannot make December 30th. Right. So it's that close. And I've already done an inside round. I don't know where more money's coming from. It'd be super. Yeah, it was dark days, right? Heavy days. We were being in my kitchen and so it was a nighttime call because it's morning over there, 12 hours off. And my wife's like, hey, are you ready for this call? And I stopped and I literally just started weeping, just crying of like, I feel so much pressure. Like hardly anybody understands how close we are to the precipice. Everybody thinks we're doing well. And in many ways we are doing well. If this call doesn't go well, I genuinely think it might be over. And, my wife is amazing. Wives that take this journey with us are amazing. She's basically just kind of held me, let me cry. And she's like, hey, if this whole thing blows up, do you think I'll still love you? I'm like, yeah. Like, hey, the people that you respect, are they still going to respect you? I'm like, yeah. Like, does God still have a plan for your life? I'm like, yeah. Like, then just go do what you're made to do. It's all going to be okay. Everything that you actually care about, nothing's going to change. Just go do what you're made to do. And dude, having someone who has that kind of perspective in the dark of the night is just so powerful. One of my friends has a saying kind of for those kinds of moments, like we need friends in our life that can sing our soul's song back to us when we've lost the melody. Right. So our spirit has a song, right? So they're kind of, hey, what were we made to do? Why were we here? Kind of what are we called to? And in the dark of the night, super pressure, like we can lose the plot, like we lose the melody. We're so consumed and stressed and being pulled in so many directions. And to have someone come back and kind of sing our song back to us to bring us back, like, you're right. It's going to be what it's going to be. And we're going to go in. And if it all fails, it's going to suck and it's going to hurt. And I'm going to be embarrassed. And you're still going to love me. And there's still a plan. And we'll continue forward. Fortunately, they said, it's great. We love it. We want to continue forward. My investors said they wanted to go forward. I went out to CES first week in January. Again, this is now 3 weeks later. And I met up with my friend who now works over at this other fingerprint company. And we start talking and very quickly turns to a very strategic conversation. And that's where this other bid came in from. And so now I have to go back and tell Alibaba, like, I need you to wait a few weeks. I'm like, what do you mean wait a few weeks? I was like, well, I had a strategic approaches and we had to talk to them. And, the goal is we were hoping that they would kind of say, well, yeah, we would like, we're okay looking at an investment as well. And initially it got crazy pissed. They're like, you're making a huge mistake, and hang up the phone. I'm like, oh man, did I just really screw this up? And again, the board knew what was going on, right? So full support of the board as we were doing this. And they called back the next day like, hey, I met with the investment committee. We would like to also have a conversation about an acquisition. So basically those two got in a bidding war. We signed a term sheet to sell iVerify on February 13th. December 9th, I'm not sure if I have a company. December 13th, I have a term sheet to sell the company for over $100 million. So it's just crazy. I mean, that's the roller coaster. So when people look at the headlines of what happened, they're like, oh, look at that. He pulled technology out of a university, raised $10 million, and 4 years later sold it for 100. Wow, that seemed like a really easy ride. Yeah, no idea.
Yeah.
Oh,
That you're like on a knife's edge on a
oh
weekly
man.
basis there.
Yeah, not for the faint of heart.
No. And what an interesting version of that story where, I think the outside version of like, oh, there's a bidding war is like, oh, we had interest and then we had more interest. Not that you had to throw away the first indication of interest in order to like have that come back the right way. So I mean, it's not really a bluff call, but like you had to jump off that cliff and like hope somebody caught you.
Yes. No, it was not a bluff. It was real. Like that'd have been idiotic to bluff that, but it was a risk, right? So you're kind of risking things. But I mean, if I've learned anything over time, I mean, relationships and just being authentic, being credible, being trustworthy is incalculable in its value.
Yeah. Well, and what an interesting, I mean, that is an interesting story as a precursor to seeing what you are doing now with Ideem for sure. It's one of those like everything makes sense in the rearview mirror kind of stories. And seeing iVerify, I mean, iVerify is a sort of an iconic like Kansas City tech story. Like ecosystems don't have like many 9-figure exits. And so I remember like everyone in the city was excited for you.
It
And to
was
see like
it was
a
fun.
global stage startup getting like built and sold in Kansas City. And I'm sure IDEEM is well on the way to being another one. Yeah, it's a very cool thing. And the timing of it all, like, you know, I really like as an investor, I'm always trying to find, see the charts, looking back at the iPod, looking back at the iPhone, you could understand what are the inputs to that, what are the battery density and scale, what are the screens, what is the storage, and like you could chart out when something like the iPod or the iPhone could become theoretically possible. You could chart out, and it sounds like you had an intuition for this. I'd be curious how methodical it was, like of the intersection between computer vision, camera quality, camera prevalence, and the software necessary to like identify those things. You could have like charted that all out and been like, yes, this will become possible in the coming year or 3.
Honestly, there was actually quite a bit of that. Like, there's some things I do well, some things I don't do well. This particular one, I got pretty right because the thesis going in was cameras are going to be upgraded on like it was like an every 9-month cycle. Like it was crazy how fast camera and we would as consumers we were upgrading every 12 to 18 months. Like
It was like
I
the
mean back
thing
in
that
that day.
phones computed on. Yeah.
Oh,
It
and it
was
was
like
and
more megapixels,
upgrade
more.
the upgrades were massive. Like between phones, like today, like, okay, there's not all that much new going from one iPhone 15 to 16 to 17. I mean, when you're on the iPhone 5 to the 6, 6 to the 7, like those were huge. And so there was a bet of these cameras are going to get better every cycle. They're going to get faster every cycle. And every time they get better, we're going to do more things on them. We're going to do more payments. We're going to do more banking. We're going to do healthcare. We're going to do business. And so there was a concerted strategy of consumers are going to pay for the hardware themselves because they're going to upgrade. Every time they upgrade, people are going to want to do more sophisticated things on them and going to require better authentication. right? And authentication is going to get harder and harder trying to, thumb in your passcode or your password. And so, yeah, that actually was a very specific strategy of like, can we make the right wave at the right time? But I'll tell you where it didn't work, right? So that iVerify worked well. This company called Redeem, which is the blockchain company. And so the thesis there was, I am still fascinated by NFTs as utility, right? In fact, verified credentials, we talked a little bit earlier about verified credentials. That's a type of an NFT, right? You have a digital thing that you can tie back that authorizes you. You can turn your driver's license into an NFT. They call it verified credential. You can have title, your house, all sorts of things that if it were digital, would be much, much better user experience. And these are all NFTs. And so the assumption was we're going to have all sorts of NFT utility use cases, not stupid monkeys or, just straight cryptocurrencies, but really valuable things that in the digital world, but you're going to have a digital wallet. And the way that we were telling people to manage digital wallets was absolutely absurd. Like, you got to have the 16 mnemonic phrase and don't tell anyone. And if you lose your keys, you're done. I'm like, that's never going to fly. Like, I've done enough in this space. Like, Web 2 users moving to Web 3 need to have an easy button. And so it's like, if you can hold your phone, you can hold your keys, right? And so like, we're going to build infrastructure and scaffolding around your phone tied to your phone number. And most of the wallets need read access. Like, if you need to prove that you have an NFT to gain access to something, you only need read access. So I didn't have to be the wallet. I could connect to MetaMask and Coinbase and name, Rainbow and forgetting half their Phantom, all these wallets that used to be so big. If you would sign a message one time, I can read the NFTs in those wallets and more easily grant you access both in the physical and digital world. Right. And so the idea is, hey, we're going to make this seamless, frictionless flow for traditional Web 2 users to use Web 3 things and not have to worry about managing all these separate wallets. The challenge was there's no Web 2 users that moved to Web 3. So I had bet on this big, massive wave, and a lot of folks did, right? So I was not alone in this. So thinking Web 3 was going to be a bigger wave, and FTX happened, and just a lot of graft and a lot of bad stuff, right? And we got way ahead of where the technology was at. And so I built a really beautiful product that had the same premise, same thesis, right? So I laid some things out that I thought were credible, but we're 5 years out. That's when I went back to the investors and like, thesis was right. We're way too early.
Well, I think that 2021 to 2023 kind of like crypto era, COVID just like changed so many trends so dramatically, and so many people stuck at home. It was so hot. NFTs were so big. The coins were skyrocketing. Like, it felt like Web3 was going to happen, in 36 months. And as soon as sort of like normal life resumed ish, it was like, oh yeah, no, this is just like a long arc of adoption of technology cycle. Like, it's weird to think about that we're still in the first 30 years of the consumer internet. We're still in the first 15, 20 years of like smartphones. Like, these are not mature technologies in the way that like electricity is. So there's a lot of interesting stuff like left to get built. And I have no doubt that like, I think a lot of the things that, you have articulated and a lot of people articulate about the use cases of NFTs and crypto and digital wallets and digital identity verification are all going to happen over the coming,
Yeah.
start
Although
meaningfully
we
over the
won't
coming
call,
10 years.
here's what we won't do. We won't call them NFT. And I
No.
don't think we'll call them Web 3. like,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
stop with the techno babble.
The
Actually,
NFTs are probably dead as a brand.
oh
Web3,
yeah.
maybe not. We'll see. But
I'll tell you actually the first call it Web 3 or blockchain use case that is going mainstream, stablecoins. Like, that is 100% legit, great use case of the technology. It's already exploding, and that will be the first mainstream Web 3 blockchain use case, but consumers won't even know what they are.
yeah, it's being adopted by Stripe and like a ton of the other sort of, the internet plumbing providers.
Yeah,
Like,
the infrastructure. It's a
yeah,
great infrastructure play. It's
yep,
exactly what it is.
yeah. But if you're not paying attention to the crypto headlines, which most people aren't anymore, you would have no idea that like it's marching forward, and a lot of that stuff is making progress. Was there a similar? I don't know, what are the curves or sort of trends that you see pushing Ideem?
I do think it is. People want frictionless flow, right? And especially emerging markets. So emerging markets are still, we're so spoiled in the US. We all have credit cards. Like, digital payments and moving away from cash is still a massive trend in emerging markets. And because they have instant payment, the regulatory risk and the regulatory requirements for authentication is just really high, tons of friction. And so the thesis is really, again, that is probably the most important magical moment in the e-commerce journey is that buy. And so we know that if you can remove even a little bit of friction, increase authorization. I didn't notice this one coming in, but I think, again, things make a lot more sense in the rearview mirror. I think these verified credentials could be absolutely as big. Now, again, that's a couple years in the making because we need to prove we have these verified credentials in a way that's really seamless to the user, both in the physical and digital world. And so again, being able to, you know, uniquely tie kind of this device to this user to these other things, I think will be really important. So yeah, people hate friction and they hate fraud. And it is an amazing amount of fraud in the world right now that causes a lot of friction.
Yeah. Yes. You can almost, if you picture what's happened in your own pockets or purse over the last like 10 years, it's like you used to have a big wallet and your phone was small and separate. And now like
Yeah,
you sort of things just keep like porting into the phone and into the phone
it
and
is. It's my
being,
it's my car keys. It's my wallet. Like that. I was I mean I way over 99% of my purchases are credit card. And even most of them Apple Pay. Just because it's easy.
right. Yeah. So, like, you go from wallet and phone separate to like one credit card on the back of your phone. And that, but even that like starts to go away. And okay, now it's my phone and my driver's license. Cause like, what if I get pulled over? Driver's license will go digital. Insurance is already digital. Yeah. It's all just going to get like sucked up into the phone. And the utility has to come with that for all these different use cases.
Yeah, so it is an interesting trend line of our phones. Well, but then again, if you were to talk to, Zuckerberg or a lot of the folks like the glasses, right? When do glasses I don't think glasses replace phones. I think you have your phone in your pocket. Right. I don't think you're like, I'm not going to have my phone. It's just your glasses augment your phone. So you'd still have your phone.
Yeah. Yeah. The culture of a different wearables is super interesting. Like
It will be.
it,
I think
w-
it's gonna be
it
hard.
yeah, it's so much more of a personal decision on like what you want to show up with and having like that level of camera presence. You want enough compute too, especially if we all want like local LLMs. You're probably going to want something like phone scale to have enough chip power with you. Yeah, it's a very very interesting thing though. What has the build process been like? I mean, doing a global, like truly global startup from middle America.
It is. It's a lot of early morning calls and a lot of late night calls. I was in Singapore in November. I did a Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines trip in February. Next week, I'm going to Turkey. Another one of my guys was in Bangkok 2 weeks ago. Probably gonna have to get down to South America this summer. So it is challenging just getting all over the world. It's funny. I have very few customers in the U.S. just because Visa and Mastercard, we all pay 3% every time we use our credit cards, but we're so used to it, we don't think about it. U.S. and Europe are unique in that we are credit card heavy users. The rest of the world is not.
What are the transaction costs for them?
Oh, tiny basis points. So again, if there's, a half a percent, a quarter of a percent, yeah, it's almost free. Well, actually, here's another fascinating. It's called open banking. So open banking, massive in India and Brazil. So in India, it's called UPI. In Brazil, it's called Pix. It's free, government mandated free. So you effectively now can do any kind of payment for free, mandated by the government. Right now, it's going to be a while before we get there in the US, but you can imagine it's also instant payment. And so the authentication requirements in those are just also off the charts. And so, helping kind of those, it's called open banking kind of more broadly. So open banking initiatives that a lot of emerging markets are moving to because they look at Brazil and India, and has been wildly successful.
That's super interesting. I mean, if you like from that point of view, seeing that work, watching a duopoly take 3% of all of the economy, all of the transactions in an economy is fucking wild.
It is crazy. No, yeah, I remember Ben Milne. Yeah, he started Dwala. He's now got Bro. I see him get up on stages a long time ago. Dude, that guy was just fire and brimstone. He got up on the stage. He was so
Oh,
fun to watch.
he's an incredible
Oh,
speaker.
he
Yeah.
would just rail on Visa and MasterCard. Like, we're devaluing the money every time we move it. This is ridiculous. There's a point in time that is value. There's no way we should have a 3% tax on every time I want to do digital payment. Right. That was kind of what Dwala was trying to solve. And now as I really spent so much time working internationally, it's like, you're right. Like, they're doing it for effectively free, but they got, Visa and MasterCard have us on a kickback scheme of we like the points because we like the points. We want to use our card because we want to use a card. The merchant's going to do whatever we want because they want to please the consumer. And you get kind of this lock-in effect of But you do see Visa and MasterCard, they know the writings on the wall. They're diversifying. They're doing all sorts of other interesting things. Stablecoins, as an example, they've got a lot of other business units they're spinning up just because they know you just can't keep charging 3% forever.
Yeah, really surprised an investor friend of mine. I was probably too early on this, but I think like 5 years ago, early crypto, I was like, I'd be short Visa over a 10-year time frame, just like imagining like Stripe coming from one side, crypto coming from the other, government coming from the bottom. It's hard to imagine that like that they managed to hold on to the juiciness of the profits that they've had for the last little bit, because it is crazy. And it's good for us as Americans, I think, to like look over the fence at what India is doing and be like, oh, maybe we're maybe we're done. We didn't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the airport
Well,
lounges weren't
eh,
worth it.
no kidding. We started with all the landlines, right? Like we had
Yeah.
landlines forever. Like these other countries just jumped straight to cellular, right? And so there's a disadvantage of being first sometimes. And we were first. And again, I would much rather have that overhang and okay, let's figure out how to redo it. But a lot of these countries jumped straight to digital, and that's for stable coins as well, right? So stable coins are transferring money digitally with very low cost in real time. And so I think we'll see, definitely stable coins continue to take a huge bite out of the traditional payment rails.
And that's awesome. I mean, the speed that you get out of the economy when like you don't have that 3% drag and the slow
Yeah, and
ACH
a few
and
days
credit
settlement
card.
time and yep.
Yeah. Yeah. The settlement time and the cut both are like really slow things down. And like, I remember being at Money 2020 and Vinod Khosla was like on stage, like issuing a challenge. He's like, the finance sector is too big. Where are the entrepreneurs? Shrink this. We should not have a finance sector being 15% of our country's economy. Like, this is not healthy. Do something. And I was like, that really stuck with me. And I thought this is a very interesting, like, is an interesting era for that whole industry. And it's cool to like look around the world and see who's doing things better than us.
One of the things that I do like about this particular sector, so my last 3 companies have all been in kind of this payments and financial services space of like, that is the one use case that every single country has, period, full stop. Right, so I do kinda like it, like, this is a global use case, looks different, they have different solutions, they have different problems, but being steeped deeply into the payments world and how money moves and how people pay, it's a good place to be.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to think of a more enduring and universal use case. Do you get like cultural whiplash flying around? Like, I imagine your customers are very
Eh,
different, dealing with very different things, very different people, driven by very different, like,
yeah, it is. I mean, that was actually a great learning. When I was with Alibaba, I had a team in Beijing, Singapore, San Francisco, and Kansas City, and really had to learn culture, motivation, incentive models, time zones. So I think I learned it was super hard. By far the hardest leadership job I've ever had, but oftentimes it's the case. Also where I learned the most. And so definitely learned a lot there. And so I've kind of gotten used to it and enjoy it. I mean, I like enjoying, like, I'm going to I think I mentioned going to Turkey next week. I'm kind of excited. I'm going to Istanbul and I've never been to Turkey. I like going to Southeast Asia. I like different experiences, different people. It's such a far cry. And I grew up on a small farm in Northeast Kansas. Right. And so this little farm, farm kid from Kansas. I'm like, what in the world am I doing in Istanbul, Turkey? But I love it.
yeah, selling software, like a global software salesman from a farm. Love it.
Yeah.
This is the story of our generation, I think.
Well,
It's
it
a
is. Like, I
very,
am
yeah.
absolutely a part of the American dream. Of like, I grew up on assisted school lunches and I was adopted when I was 6 and had a rough childhood, but, was able to make it and able to continue to kind of live this American dream. And, actually one of the coolest things for me is when people who used to work for me go out and do their own, right? It's kind of like coaching tree. Like that is one of the coolest experience, the coolest senses of gratitude, just feeling gratified. Like, hey, I made a difference. Not just, hey, we did well, we built this company, solved a problem, but you kind of inspired the next generation to jump out and take the leap themselves.
Yeah, especially I imagine some of that is happening in Kansas City, and especially in a city like this where they're not an abundance of like people who have done what you've done. And so I imagine like, the cultures that you can build in the companies and showing people how to operate at speed on a global scale and deliver, huge value is massive. And the downstream effects and the startups that come from that, the rush effect, we're going to call it,
We better find
is
a better name
huge.
than that. Uh, but it is fun, and I love doing. What's cool is that I love doing it. Like the I don't do it for those reasons, but I say those reasons are very motivating, and it's still super hard. Like, Ideem is still hard. Like, the no's still hurt. Like, you get, I still get far more no's than I get yeses. And those aren't easy days. And you get some days it's 3 steps backwards and 1 step forward. And sometimes you get those for multiple days in a row. So just because I've done it before, it's still super hard, but I do enjoy it, and kind of seeing others around me being willing to take that. Like, even just like literally this afternoon at a guy who's in a pipeline entrepreneurial program here in town, called him. I was like, "Hey, I've been trying to think. I think my product might work kind of at banks. Can you give me some thoughts?" And I'm like, "Okay, don't sell the A, B, and C. There's no way. Like, you're so small. Like, there's going to be a waste of time. However, community banks love this kind of a thing, and I think it would be a great play." And is like, "Well, when over like I know like 3 of them, so send me a note and I'll connect you." And I mean, for me, it was 20 minutes. Like, super, really, again, very little out of my day. But for him, it was huge, right? I'm going to be able to kind of, transfer my trust with, some of my friends at these local community banks to him, and he's going to be able to move a lot faster. But that feels good.
Yeah, that's huge. And, I really enjoy talking to people who are in the stage of life where they're playing it for the love of the game, and you know it and they know it. And I feel like you can bring a calm and an energy and an excitement to it that, like, when you know you're there because you're having fun doing it and you want to see the outcome, and
Good. I
and bring
think
everybody along the journey with you.
And for me, part of what's fun, again, I love that you're kind of working on Scribe, and you're kind of in now, and you're kind of got that CEO hat on of it. It's fun doing it with others, right? Because there is something where, it is a unique game, and you can't just read about it. You're not going to go figure this out as an MBA. And so those who are kind of on the kind of the sojourn, I love just hanging out with. I get super encouraged. I think I encourage them, and like there's definitely a synergy of kind of being in it together on the journey that makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that is a fantastic place to leave it. But where should people get more of you who want more of you?
The website, useideem.com. You can check us out there on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm Tobias Rush. Come check me out. Always happy to help. Eric, thanks for doing these podcasts as well. These are fun. These are great. Keep building.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing what you know. I appreciate you taking the time.
For sure.